The year was 1942, and Mexico City, a metropolis burgeoning with life and change, was about to confront a horror that would redefine its understanding of crime. A series of grim discoveries began to surface, initially with an unsettling aura of isolated incidents, but soon coalescing into a pattern indicative of something far more sinister. The unfolding events would reveal the chilling reality of a serial killer operating within its very heart, a revelation that sent shockwaves through a society unaccustomed to such calculated brutality. This was the story of Gregorio Cárdenas, later infamously known as the Tacuba Strangler, a name that would forever be etched into the annals of Mexican criminal history. The initial findings were fragmented, disquieting whispers that grew into a deafening roar of public fear. In September 1942, the first bodies were unearthed, revealing a grim tableau of violence. The victims, predominantly young women, were discovered in the Tacuba neighborhood, specifically within the confines of a seemingly ordinary residence. As investigators meticulously pieced together the macabre puzzle, the shocking truth emerged. These were not random acts of violence, but the calculated deeds of a single individual. The individual in question was Gregorio Cárdenas, a name that would soon become synonymous with terror and intellectual depravity. Cárdenas was an unlikely suspect. He was a university student, outwardly brilliant and introspective, pursuing a demanding degree in chemistry at the prestigious National Autonomous University of Mexico. His academic pursuits and quiet demeanor presented a stark contrast to the heinous crimes attributed to him. Yet the evidence pointed unequivocally in his direction. The victims included 4 young women, often referred to by the societal label cabareteras, a term that, while not always accurate, reflected a certain perception of their public-facing roles. Their lives were tragically cut short, their dreams extinguished by an unseen hand. In a particularly perplexing turn, a male student was also among the deceased, his murder suggesting a departure from the perceived pattern and adding another layer of complexity to the unfolding mystery. The crimes were concentrated in Mexico City, with the Tacuba neighborhood serving as the epicenter of this dark narrative. It was within Cárdenas's own home, a place typically associated with sanctuary and privacy, that these atrocities were committed and the bodies concealed. The sheer audacity and proximity of the crimes to everyday life intensified the public's horror. When Cárdenas was eventually apprehended, he confessed to the murders, offering a chillingly detailed account of his actions. His motives, as he articulated them, were a complex tapestry woven from psychological issues, unrequited love, and a profound desire for control. Early psychological profiles painted a disturbing picture of severe personality disorders, attempting to explain the inexplicable transformation of a promising student into a ruthless killer. The rationale offered by Cárdenas provided some insight, though it never fully justified the brutality of his deeds. He spoke of a deep-seated need to exert power, a compensatory mechanism perhaps for perceived inadequacies. The revelation of such a mind operating within the academic sphere was deeply unsettling, challenging societal assumptions about intelligence and morality. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Gregorio Cárdenas's early life offered few overt indicators of the darkness that would later consume him. Born into a middle-class family, he was consistently described as an intelligent and remarkably studious individual. His academic prowess was undeniable, a characteristic that propelled him towards higher education at a time when such opportunities were highly valued. He embarked on a rigorous degree in chemistry at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, or UNAM, an institution renowned for its academic excellence. Within the university's hallowed halls, Cárdenas maintained a quiet demeanor, often perceived as introverted. He was not known for his social integration, preferring solitude and intellectual pursuits over boisterous camaraderie. This detachment, while not inherently sinister, would later be reinterpreted through the lens of his horrific crimes, suggesting a deeper psychological isolation. The Mexico City of the 1940s provided a complex backdrop for these events. It was a period marked by significant urban growth, transforming the capital into a bustling metropolis. This rapid expansion brought with it social changes, new opportunities, and also new challenges in understanding urban crime. While the concept of criminal psychology was emerging globally, local law enforcement and the public were still grappling with the nuances of forensic science and criminal profiling. Public perception of crime was often sensationalized, driven by newspaper headlines and radio dramas, yet the idea of a serial killer, especially one operating with such cold premeditation, was a relatively new and terrifying concept for the general populace. The brutality and calculated nature of Cárdenas's actions would challenge the prevailing understanding of criminality, forcing a re-evaluation of what constituted a monster within society. The victims of Gregorio Cárdenas were a tragic testament to the social dynamics of the era. 4 young women, often labeled by society as cabareteras, became his prey. This label, frequently used to categorize women working in entertainment or nightlife, carried a certain societal judgment, though it did not necessarily define their true professions or lives. Their individual stories remain largely overshadowed by the horror of their deaths, but their disappearances, initially treated as isolated incidents, spoke to a vulnerability within the urban landscape. Beyond these 4 women, a male student also fell victim to Cárdenas. His murder stood apart, suggesting a different motive or circumstance entirely. This deviation from the pattern of female victims added another layer of confusion to the initial investigation, making it harder for authorities to connect the dots. The lack of immediate connection between the disappearances allowed Cárdenas to continue his horrifying spree unnoticed for a period. The genesis of the investigation was slow and fragmented, typical of cases where a pattern is not immediately evident. Initial police efforts were focused on individual missing persons reports, each treated as a separate, unrelated incident. The sheer volume of disappearances in a rapidly growing city meant that linking them was a considerable challenge. It was the discovery of the first body, followed by others, all buried within Cárdenas's property in Tacuba, that dramatically shifted the focus. The grotesque revelation of multiple graves on a single residential plot sent shockwaves through the community. The disbelief was palpable, particularly when the perpetrator's academic background came to light. The idea that a seemingly brilliant university student could harbor such depravity challenged societal norms and expectations. The initial horror soon gave way to a desperate search for answers, for understanding, and for justice in the face of an unprecedented evil that had taken root in the heart of Mexico City. The revelation of the bodies on Cárdenas's property quickly led to his apprehension. The police, acting on the grim discovery, moved swiftly to detain the young student. Initially, Gregorio Cárdenas maintained a facade of innocence, denying any involvement in the heinous crimes. However, under sustained interrogation, his composure began to crack. What followed was a detailed and chilling confession, delivered with a disconcerting calm that further perplexed the authorities. His articulate manner, even when recounting the most horrific details, suggested an intricate and disturbing psychological landscape. This detachment from the gravity of his actions made him an enigma, confounding even seasoned investigators. Cárdenas meticulously detailed each murder. The method of killing, predominantly strangulation, was a recurring element, revealing a pattern of control and intimacy in his violence. He described how he lured his victims, often under false pretenses, back to his home in Tacuba. There, within the confines of his private space, he would commit the unspeakable acts. The disposal of the bodies was equally methodical. He buried them in his garden or within other parts of his property, attempting to conceal his monstrous deeds. He recounted the specific circumstances surrounding each victim's death, offering insights into his state of mind during those moments. The male student's murder, for instance, differed in its immediate context, reportedly stemming from an argument rather than a calculated seduction, yet it too ended with the same brutal finality. These confessions painted a vivid, horrifying picture of a serial killer operating with a chilling level of premeditation and a complete disregard for human life. In the aftermath of his confession, Gregorio Cárdenas underwent extensive psychological analysis. Early psychiatric evaluations, conducted under the diagnostic frameworks of the 1940s, attempted to categorize his complex mental state. Diagnoses such as psychopathy and schizophrenia were considered, though it is important to note that diagnostic criteria have significantly evolved since then. These assessments sought to understand the underlying motives for his actions. Cárdenas himself offered various explanations, attempting to rationalize the inexplicable. He spoke of profound feelings of social inadequacy and rejection, suggesting that his quiet demeanor masked a deep-seated insecurity. He cited an unrequited love for a woman, an emotional catalyst that he claimed triggered his first murder. This initial act of violence, he implied, unleashed a darker impulse. Furthermore, he expressed a twisted desire to cleanse society of perceived immorality, particularly targeting the cabareteras, reflecting the societal judgments prevalent at the time. Above all, he confessed to deriving a perverse sense of power and control from the acts, a compensation for his perceived lack of agency in other aspects of his life. His intellectual capacity, which had once pointed towards a promising academic career, was now seen as a tool used to plan and execute his crimes with chilling precision, and later to articulate his twisted justifications. The trial of Gregorio Cárdenas became a national spectacle, attracting intense public and media attention both within Mexico and internationally. The public's fascination was undeniable, mixed with profound horror. They grappled with the terrifying idea that a monster could be hidden behind the intellectual facade of a university student, challenging their understanding of good and evil. The legal proceedings focused heavily on Cárdenas's mental state, with his defense arguing for diminished responsibility due to his psychological condition. This emphasis on his mental health was a critical aspect of the trial, aiming to explain, if not excuse, his heinous acts. Ultimately, the verdict reflected the psychiatric assessments. Gregorio Cárdenas was not sentenced to a conventional prison term. Instead, due to his diagnosed mental health issues, he was committed to a psychiatric facility, a decision that underscored the era's evolving understanding of criminal psychology and mental illness. His case became a landmark, forcing Mexico to confront the dark complexities of the human psyche and the unsettling reality of serial murder within its burgeoning society.